If any of you are interested when you're out hiking around, if you're out hiking around and want to try to identify some of the mosses and liverworts in the area around here, or if you're lucky enough to go to Isle Royale, this is a little tiny book written by Dr. Denise Klein, who is guessing she's retired by now, but she was a professor up at Michigan Tech University when I was there as a graduate student. And she was the resident expert on all things bryophytes. And so she's got really nice images in this book. It gives description and then usually some little anecdotal interesting thing about them. And so if you're, I think you can find them in used bookstores. I think I've seen it off and on Amazon's website. So if you're interested, it's easy to put into your back pocket or into your backpack as you're hiking around. Also a reminder, I put these readings the other day into the videos. That first one, How Plants Crawl Out of the Sea, is like a 2-minute video. So really straightforward. And then the Word document has the transcript of that video. So if you'd rather read it and watch it, or if you both, that have that, plus a little article further explaining, very short. And then that PDF in the middle, really just looking at the title, reading the abstract, maybe the intro. That's all that you really need to do for that. But it's all of these readings are getting at the idea that when you make the shift from aquatic life to terrestrial life, that was a profound shift. And they think mycorrhizal fungi were absolutely necessary for that process, and that we can actually find the genes that allow for the plants to form this partnership. They actually show up in the algae. And so the idea that as algae are washing ashore, perhaps they already had the genes and were capable of turning on those genes and immediately forming this relationship with the fungi on the land. So give that a little look-see and read that or watch the video. So last time, looking at bryophytes in lab yesterday, hopefully you got to see some very interesting, cute bryophytes. So mosses, liverworts, and hornworts. When you look at, this is a kind of an abbreviated phylogenetic tree. And so at the bottom of the tree, the base of the tree, you're seeing the idea of an ancestral green algae or charophyte. Okay, either one is okay. All right, and then you see the speciation and evolution occurring from that. So we're zooming in. You can see the very first offshoot are the liverworts, and then the hornworts are next, and then the mosses are coming up. All right, so the closer you are to the ancestral, to the base, the more primitive. The brown boxes are extinct species of plants. They're only in the fossil record. So we're going to see this again because this actually has the different phyla of plants all the way to the angiosperm. So we'll come back to this. But initially, so basically the way that this is drawn, this is indicating that we have the bryophytes, and they were the first to speciate off of the green algal ancestor. So they're the most primitive plants in the evolutionary timeline. And we're going to find out that they are quite different in many respects to, when we've been talking so far about the plant anatomy, they have a very different anatomy. So let's get into bryophytes a little bit more. We see that they, in general, this isn't 100%, but in general, they prefer moist habitats. They're well adapted to that, but there are some very notable exceptions. They're all pretty small. They don't get very tall, very big. They're petite, and there's a reason for that. Mainly because they do not have, well, first of all, they don't have true roots or leaves. We often refer to what look like roots. We call them rhizoids because they're not true root tissue. They're just epidermal cells. So they're very uncomplicated structures. Um, they're just kind of like trichomes in a way. They're just elongated epidermal cells, and they help anchor the plant to whatever substrate it's growing on. They're small mainly because of this idea. They don't have true vascular tissue. They don't have xylem, phloem, in the true sense of how we define that. So that really limits you. If you don't have a way, an internal highway system to move sugars long distances through your body, you don't have a way to do mineral and water transport through your body, you're going to stay small. Otherwise, it's just not going to work. And so no true vascular tissue. However, some have these specialized structures that they have called leptoids and hydroids. The hydroids are for water transport, leptoids sugar transport, but it's not true vascular tissue. When you look at it, it's very simple, rudimentary. So no true vascular tissue. So basically, they just have to absorb everything through their environment, through their whole body. Yep. They're a little bit longer and bigger. Yeah, rhizoids are a little bit longer, a little bit thicker. Yeah, and they tend to anchor. They can grow into whatever substrate. Whereas root hairs, their main function is to suck up water and a little different. Yep. So they basically just use their whole body to get access to water and minerals. They can certainly do photosynthesis, so they're making their own sugars. So, that stays the same. But basically, it's just rainwater, fog, dew, dust that they're getting their necessary water requirements, mineral requirements. So they don't have, we talked about the soil system and how roots have to get access to minerals. It doesn't change with the bryophytes. They're just absorbing everything through their whole body, getting it like that. So also, they're pretty slow growing. The notable exception is sphagnum peat moss. That one, relatively speaking, grows more quickly compared to the other bryophytes and mosses in particular. Okay, so bryophytes are very petite and dainty. You can find them all over around here. So in the algal slide set, and now in this slide set, I'm mentioning a few key characteristics that are causing scientists to say, why they think algae are the direct ancestor of the bryophytes, because they both contain chlorophyll A and B. If they make extra sugar, and they can store it up in the form of starch until it's needed. When you look at their sperm, they're motile, they have flagella, and allows them to be more motile. And this last bullet point may sound like a picky detail, but it's important. And so this last idea, free water is necessary for fertilization. We're going to see that that will shift over time as we get into some other groups of plants. And so this idea that you have to have sperm swimming in free water to make it to where the egg is. It's kind of astounding that this actually occurs as frequently as it does. I'll show you some pictures and get into that a little bit more. So the alternation of generations we talked about the last time, and they went over it in lab as well. So here's your third swipe at it. So again, when you're studying this, I encourage you, like today, over the weekend, draw this and talk your way through it over and over until you're really comfortable with it, because this isn't going away, and I'll certainly be asking about this on lecture exam. So here, this alternation of the haploid and diploid state. In the plant world, we talk about the haploid state, the 1N state as the zoophyte, and the diploid state as the sporophyte. Okay, and then if you want to go from gametophyte to sporophyte, you have to have the sperm and egg finding each other and fertilization occurs. And then if you want to go from the sporophyte to the gametophyte, you have to go through meiosis to cut the number of chromosomes. To go from 2N to 1N, the only way to do that is meiosis. And so that's the kind of the basic idea of how they go between those two phases of their life. And then some of the other things to think about, look at the gametophyte phase, for example. The job of the gametophyte is to make gametes, which are egg and sperm. And if everything goes okay, you'll get full production of that just through mitosis, normal like cell division. And then you'll get the sperm and egg, get the egg fertilized. Then we start using the word zygote. We like to use the word zygote as well. And so that's the initial fertilized egg. And as soon as you get that, you're in the full diploid state, 2N. And now just through regular cell division, it's going to grow and grow and grow and grow and grow into the sporophyte stage. And then at a special spot of the sporophyte body, so to speak, you're going to get four big seeds. And before they can be considered fully mature and ready to go, they got to go through meiosis. And once they do that, then they can be dispersed out in different mechanisms. Some of them quite amazing how long they can get flung, how far they can get flung. Okay, so back and forth. And so this terminology isn't going to shift. You know, we got this now from now until the end of the semester. So learning it now is a really good strategy to not be confused as we work our way forward here. All right, so this is the sexual life cycle because we have sperm and egg, we got the meiosis event going on. However, when you, at least the way they estimate it right now, they're saying, yeah, it seems like most reproduction actually is asexual, where they just kind of clone themselves, fragment their bodies. It seems that's a very favorite way to do it. But let's put that aside for now and just think about the sexual life cycle and some of the things going on there. So with the bryophytes, when you're out hiking around and you see the mosses out there, most of what you're looking at is the gametophyte phase. So when you say that dominates, they spend more of their life in the gametophyte phase than they do in the sporophyte. And so again, the job is for the gametophyte to make gametes, which are egg and sperm. I need you to know this term. We're going to zoom into where are they doing this in their gametophyte portion of their body. It's the antheridia is where we see the sperm being produced. The way I memorized that was the word antheridia. Anther is close to antler, which I think about male deer having antlers, males produce sperm. So that's how I remembered it. So, but it's always a good idea to find some kind of silly little way to remember some of these things. Kind of sticks better in your head. Each, the singular of antheridia and antheridium, each antheridium has lots of sperm, chock full of sperm. All right. Then what the goal is to get that sperm over to the egg. So the sperm has to make it to the archegonia, which is another region of the gametophyte body that is specialized for egg production. And if you look at the word archegonia, egg is in it. It's not number G, it's in G, but it's there. Archegonia, right? So that's the site of egg production. Now, with the idea of egg production, only one egg per archegonia. So you have a very precious egg. Each archegonia just has one. Now, the gametophyte body can have several archegonia, but each archegonia has one egg. So very, very precious. So now you have to imagine the sperm that's in the antheridia have to use free water to swim to make it to the archegonia. I'll show you some pictures of where all this is in the body of the gametophyte. If that can happen, then you get fertilization, and then the zygote is the product of that. So sperm and egg fuse, you get the zygote, and then just through rounds of growth, then they start calling it after it's grown up a little bit, they start referring to it as the embryo. All right, so here, so let's imagine the sperm from the Antheridia swam its way over to an egg in an archegonium, and you got fertilization. Then you will start to see that zygote actually will develop eventually into the sporophyte. And this is lots of just, cell division and growth going on, lots of mitosis just to get it to grow bigger. And then it'll start to differentiate a little bit so it looks like a mature sporophyte. And when they examine all these different species and look at the sporophyte phase, they're attached physically to the gametophyte. And they seem to be really dependent on the gametophyte. Like you can't separate them apart from each other, the sporophyte dies. And so the gametophyte is really important. It kind of supports and sustains the sporophyte. So as the sporophyte is differentiating, and you'll see pictures where there's going to be special regions of the sporophyte that are going to be dedicated to allowing for spore production. And so the area where that's happening is called the sporangium. Okay, so the sporangium is just that tissue. If you were to break it open and look inside, that's where all the spores are getting made. So the sporangium houses the spores. Sporangium houses the spores. Okay? And so they kind of have this dedicated enclosed space, protected. Crack that open, you'd see a bunch of spores in there, and they're busy, developing. And then before they're fully mature, they have to go through meiosis. And then once they do that, usually that sporangium will break open and release the spores. And sometimes the spores can get catapulted quite a distance from the spore. So this is a typical life cycle drawing for, in this case, for the mosses. And so it's typical that you'll see male and female mosses, the gametophyte phase will have like a male gametophyte, female gametophyte. They're showing here. They're showing more like we call this a cushiony or a feathery moss. And so if you look at the tip, you will see, especially if you had a hand lens, you would see that's the part of the gametophyte where they start to make the special tissue that's going to house the sperm. Here you have three well-developed antheridia in the male, tip of the male, and they're trying to show lots and lots of sperm in there. And here, the female gametophyte, they're showing a couple of archegonium, and Archegonia equine, the large egg. And then with the blue, they're trying to show you need free water to get the sperm to get delivered to the egg. Now, the egg is in an enclosed special region with special tissue that, its job is to house the egg. It's very precious. You don't want anything where the elements around, bad weather. So it's very nice. It's protected like that. Sperm gets in, a little opening, and will fertilize that egg. That egg just stays there. It's not like that egg goes anywhere. It stays there. And so now that fertilized egg becomes the zygote and will grow and develop. Okay, so this egg doesn't go anywhere. It stays in place, it's fertilized, and then we start calling it the zygote. And you can see it's starting to differentiate here on the lower half of this image until you have the more mature looking sporophyte, okay, attached to the gametophyte. Did you see any of these sporophyte in Were there any sporophyte mosses you looked at? Well, if you did, and you've probably seen this in your life on alpine, if you see that sporophyte like that, and it's attached to that gametophyte, you know it's a female, right? I just kept saying that egg is going for it. So anytime you see that, you know, oh yeah, there's a female gametophyte, female moss, okay? And it was successfully, the egg was successfully fertilized, and you get that really cool looking sporophyte. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, they tend to be clustered with each other. But still, even given that, I mean, it's like, wow, you know, you look, the opening's not very big. You know, the probably their one of their really good strategies is they make a ton of sperm. And so there's, you know, lots of chances of getting that egg. But if you're out like around, you see, oh, look at that, you know, the sporophyte, you know that that's the female moth. Yes. So like the male gametophyte is considered different individuals of stock. Usually the cluster, like if you see a cluster of male gametophytes all clustered, they're usually clonal, identical. And same with female because they tend to grow asexually quite a bit. And then every once in a while they'll shift into sexual like this. And with you have to like you have to bring a hand lens with you to really tell if you don't see it sporophyte. You look at a cluster of mosses, it can be really hard to tell, like which is male and which is female, unless you can find the sporophyte. You would need a hand lens and maybe even a dissecting scope to really get at that. But usually, especially with erect mosses that pop off the substrate like that, it's almost always that you will find the reproductive structure, the antheridium and the archegonium. Okay, some other things here I wanted you to note is the sporangium at the tip of the sporophyte. Okay, so that's that specialized region, and it looks different. You can see it kind of looks like a sac. So often sporangium tissue will look like that. It'll be in an enlarged kind of sac-like region, and that's the area. If you were to peer inside there, you see all kinds of spores. So it's not just mosses that form sporangium, by the way. We see that in fungi. It's kind of a common strategy to have like a dedicated part of the, in this case, the sporophyte body, a dedicated region for the spore production. And it makes sense that they put it right at the tip so that when the spores catapult out of there, hopefully they have a little bit of height to get up into the air current and get carried to some fresh substrate where they can fall and germinate and start growing. So once that spore, if it gets somewhere suitable and starts to grow, then you see these little, I call them baby gametophytes. Fancy word is protonema, which I don't really care that you know that. But basically, if you don't really see that in nature, that would be really hard. You'd have to be like your nose to the soil with a hand lens in tow to be able to see any of the baby gametophytes. And then eventually they'll develop into the full size and shape of mature gametophyte. So beautiful but petite organisms. Here on the left, you're seeing some sporophytes that are pretty much good to go in the sense that once you see them browning like that, initially they start out green and then they'll shift to brown. And then the sporangium tends to go very pale brown like that. That's when you know they're about ready to pop and the spores are going to get released. So there's different forms of, here they're trying to also show the cushiony versus feathery. Yeah, I guess, yeah, cushiony. So, polytrichome that. And then there's feathery versions too that you might mistake for, you might think that that's not a bryophyte, but it is. So they can be very upright. Here you're looking down on a patch of mosses, and this is actually male. This is actually a very good image. Often you don't see it this well of a difference, but all of that kind of lighter that's the tip of the Xenophyte, and that's, if you were to look more carefully, especially if you took a piece of tissue and looked under the microscope, that's where all the Antheridia are located. Here you can see all the dark granules, but that's all sperm in there. So you see it on one gametophyte, male gametophyte, you have lots of Antheridia, and each one is just jam-packed with sperm. And then here you have both female on the left with Archegonia, and then the male Antheridia on the right. And so you can see, it's kind of hard to see, but there's an egg forming in most of these now. They're there. So it's hard to get good slide specimens. Like here, this is hard. It's a lot of the Archegonia they're not really doing anything yet, except for maybe that one. So getting it at the right stage and taking a sample for the microscope slides can be tricky. Here they're showing the egg there. So if that egg gets fertilized, if a water droplet brings the sperm, then it will get fertilized and it'll start out something like this, where the sporophyte will grow right from that fertilized egg. And initially, a young sporophyte will look like this, where you can often see green, the reddish stalk sometimes. It can be green or reddish like that. And then the sporangium tissue is usually green. And then over time, that will shift to look more like that, where the sporophyte goes more brownish. And then they're so cute. The little tip will break open with drying action. As it gets drier and drier and dehydrates, it will break open. Here's a really nice image of the sporangium. And so here's another one. These are special. They do photography competitions every year with small, like microscopic. These are taken from really nice images. So then those usually break open and release a bunch of spores that hopefully settle somewhere suitable and start to grow into the baby gametophytes. And then they just keep growing and growing and differentiating into the mature gametophyte. So mosses are probably the type of bryophyte you're most familiar with, I'm guessing. They're very abundant. They're the most abundant of, the mosses, liverworts, hornworts. Mosses win. And if you look at them, we say they're radially symmetrical, the gametophytes. What we mean by that is if you look at one of the, let's go back to, where's a good image of it? Maybe this one. Radially symmetrical. That means no matter which way you cut the gametophyte in half, so if you're looking down on these erect gametophytes, and if you imagine cutting it in half, no matter which way you cut it, they're mirror images of each other. So that's what we mean by radially symmetrical. So sometimes that's a useful thing to think about if you're out hiking and you find something, and I'll explain why that's important as we work through this, but radially symmetrical mosses can do that. And then, for sure, most mosses, they have a dedicated, like this is a male moss, this is a female moss, right? They have the production of sperm and egg on different gametophytes, so unisexual. And usually you have to look at the tips of the gametophyte for the Antheridia and Archegonia, so that's where you would first look. So mosses are super cute and super abundant. However, some of what I'm going to name next are not mosses, and I really, really It's so annoying that these other plants got these names. Irish moss. So Irish moss is actually an algae. All right, so that's not good. Then you got reindeer moss. You know what that is? Lichen. That's not moss, it's lichen. All right. Then you have club moss. Club moss you haven't learned about yet, but they're a seedless vascular plant. Totally different group of plants. What else? Spanish moss. If you have spent any time down south or from the south, that's actually an angiosperm, a flowering plant that's actually in the same family as pineapples. They tend to be growing on trees. They don't harm the trees, but they just grow. You know. So all of those are not moss. So unfortunately, whoever gave them those common names tried to confuse us, I guess. It's really annoying. All right, beautiful structures, nice, delicate forms. It's fun making little terrariums with mosses. Sometimes we have those for sale, by the way, at plant sales. We did that last April. Or maybe this April, with the upcoming plant sale, I might see some of those. So very, very beautiful. Has anyone gone to the Olympic National Park in the West Coast, California, or well, North Dakota? Actually, it's more in Washington State. On the coast there, I've never been. That's on my to-do list for sure. This is an image from that. One of my good friends from grad school went there, and she was showing me pictures when I saw her in person. And oh, there was everything was so green, it kind of hurt your eyes. The green was so vibrant, and most of that was due to just the tremendous amount of mosses, in particular, living in that area. Just incredible how they covered, it seemed, almost every surface. Tree trunks, branches, rocks, just everywhere. Beautiful, beautiful images. So these are all from the Olympic National Park. It's the only rainforest we have in the continental United States. It's not a tropical rainforest, it's a temperate rainforest, but it's the only one that we have. So very, very unique habitat for the United States. Here, I didn't take this picture, but gorgeous, gorgeous image of the raindrops clinging to the, in this case, to the sporophyte. Very cool image. Okay, so mosses are very beautiful, very interesting forms. So, you know, they do have some definite advantages in one respect. You know, being non-vascular, not having xylem phloem on the face of it, that might sound like a big drawback. But on the other hand, it really allows them to get into territory that can be very free and open, where there's not a ton of competition, because the vascular plants can't handle some of the areas where you see mosses and other bryophytes hang out. So if you think about, you know, even things like, you know, concrete and cliff faces, rooftops, tree trunks, you know, vascular plants do that. And so in that respect, they kind of have a competitive edge in these more barren habitats, I guess, where vascular plants just could not survive, because vascular plants have to put their roots into the soil, and bryophytes don't have to do that. So it allows them to colonize these very unique habitats compared to vascular plants. So far, we can't see any marine species, so no ocean dwelling, but there are some freshwater mosses, in particular on liverworts and hornworts. And then if you go to more challenging environments like the Arctic or Antarctic areas, they actually are more popular, and there's more populations of them than you find with vascular plants. They are pretty good at dealing with very harsh temperatures. And so, and darkness, they can just kind of go dormant for long stretches, and then they'll revive under suitable conditions. And there is some, I just read, in fact, the other day, an article, a published scientific article where they claim mosses don't form mycorrhizae, but you look at the publication date, and since that paper was published, they've now discovered that there are mosses that can form mycorrhizal relationships, which makes sense. They are the first, they were one of the most primitive plants out there that made that shift. And so now it seems weird because I just got done telling you not too long ago that mycorrhizal fungi hang out with roots, but they don't have roots. And so this just goes to show how fungi can be very adaptable. They don't have to hang out with root tissue to still form a relationship with their host plant. And so they can hang out with those little rhizoids, and that's just fine. So very interesting. So these very barren areas, like if you can imagine bare rock, like Sugarloaf, for example, lots of bare rock up there. There's a lot of lichen and mosses in those areas. And then once they get in and establish themselves through their living their lives and their actions, they can create conditions that allow other organisms to then come in after them and get established. So they're very, considered primary colonizers in that regard because they can handle just fine growing on bare rock. Okay with that. But as they grow, they are creating conditions that can allow for some soil formation, and other organisms can then start to come in. So kind of similar to lichen in that regard, although they don't break down rocks nearly to the extent that we see with lichen. Unfortunately, they are sensitive to air pollution because they're absorbing all of that through their whole body, whatever's in the rainwater or dew. If there's nasty chemicals in that, they're going to get it. And they don't have a good way to excrete it. Sulfur dioxide, they've looked at that pretty carefully. They are unfortunately good at accumulating nasty chemicals like heavy metals. Zinc and lead have been found in their tissues at pretty high levels. On the other hand, there's some that can hang out in deserts. Even though I said most bryophytes like wet areas, there are some that are pretty successful in desert environments. And so the images that you're looking at here is one of the desert adapted plants. This is Tortula ruralis. And on the left is when it's droughted, desiccated, and looks dead. But it's not dead. And so if you were to take your water bottle and dump that onto that, it would green up like what you see on the right. And then if it goes through a drought period, it'll just kind of desiccate itself and go back to looking dead, but it's not. Mosses, especially sphagnum moss, can be used for that. Yeah, we'll talk, in fact, that's what I'm talking about next, is sphagnum. Sphagnum moss has been heavily used for a variety of reasons, including filtration. Sphagnum peat moss, that particular moss species, is very good at absorbing water too. That's why if you look on a bag of potting soil, you'll see sphagnum moss has been mixed into it. And that's because when you water that soil, the moss in there will hold on to the water and then slowly release it, so you don't have to water your plants as frequently. Absolutely. Yeah, and that would be so. And there's also controversy over harvesting sphagnum peat moss. Some people call it you can sustainably harvest peat moss, and lots of other people say no. So there's a lot of debate right now on that, and it depends who you're talking to. I'm right now I'm sitting on the idea of show me the data, because I tend to think it's probably not terribly sustainable, but I'm not an expert in that. So it's like, I'd like to see the data on that. But it is an amazing organism. All of this kind of grayish area, those are the cells that pump up water, hold on to water. And then the green cells around all that are the photosynthetic cells. So they're very, very good at absorbing water, and they slowly release it. That's why the soil stays moist. Very low pHs, right? So they hang out in really acidic conditions. For a moss, they grow pretty quickly. That's one reason some scientists say it is sustainable because it can grow and be replaced, harvested. So the soil conditioner idea is the big potting soil I talked to you about already, but they've used sphagnum peat moss historically because it grows at such low pHs. It's kind of a antiseptic, really. Bacteria and fungi have a hard time with that low of a pH, and so they used to put it like in diapers, so that when the baby, you know, excreted urine and feces, the antiseptic properties, the low pH, would help keep the baby's skin healthy. They used it to stuff furniture, dressing burns in World War I, in particular, and well, even World War II. If soldiers had skin injuries, they somebody, I think it was a nurse at a frontline station, they ran out of bandages, so she grabbed some sphagnum moss and put it on the wound and realized that it actually worked better than the bandages. And so they started doing that to treat burns in both the world wars. So that's something that, if you ever cut yourself, you could do that. They use it for oil spills, where, especially along the surface of the ocean, they will try, or the shore, they will use sphagnum peat moss to absorb the oil. And then people use it a lot when they're shipping shellfish all over the world. They'll pack it with sphagnum because it keeps the bacteria and fungi from degrading the seafood before it gets to its destination and keeps it nice and moist. And yeah, so sphagnum peat moss has a lot of a lot of good uses for it. But there's debate about how sustainable we're harvesting it and whether or not we should continue to do that. So bog environment, lots of sphagnum moss around here if you've gone bog walking. And this was a person that was found buried in the bog. And you can still see all of the skin attached. This is a 2,000-year-old body, and it still has skin. That's not normal. But it's because it was buried in a sphagnum peat moss bog. And because of all the antiseptics and low pH, the microbes didn't have a chance to degrade and break down and decompose the body. So harvesting peat moss, it's a thing. You can burn it for fuel, heat. People do that in their stoves, for example. Some say it's renewable, some say it's not. One last thing, if you're over 21, tasted whiskey, that very kind of, to me, it tastes like you're eating dirt. They call it peaty whiskey. I'm over 21, so I've sampled, and I can't stand it. I've tried to embrace the idea because I think it's a cool idea. They'll actually have the peat fire going, barley in the smoke. So when then they take that barley and make the whiskey from that, it has a very smoky, peaty flavor. So something to think about if you're over 21. All right. So we'll continue on with the bryophytes. Thank you for hanging a couple extra minutes here.